Hello and welcome to our podcast. Hi, and today we are doing a new type of podcast.
So this time, previously we were interviewing guests. Now, since we've interviewed guests and we've learned a lot from them, we're taking a little bit of a sort of a hiatus. There'll be a podcast coming up with guests, and we're gonna take people as they come. But then we realized there are many people that we met that we are not being able to have an interview or podcast with that do not know a lot about like what startups are, what entrepreneurship is.
Yes.
And basically we don't even know a lot, and we started this whole thing to understand what that is and
To get in the context of what the startup
idea
is.
ecosystem is. So we have lessons, essays for people who started doing this like 14 years ago, almost more than that, right? And we're thinking of trying to understand how the people in America, US, they started this whole startup culture and they boomed it after 10 years of successful entrepreneurial thinking. And we want to learn a lot from that, and we hope that translates well into developing nations and developing nations like ours, like Nepal's. And then hopefully that can help. So based on that, today we're going to discuss a lot about the essay by Paul Graham on his website, paulgraham.com/bronze.html, which is titled "Why Smart People Have Bad Ideas." So this essay was published in April 2005. This was like 14 years ago, and this was like the first time they started doing the Y Combinator summer seed funding camp, or it's more of an event these days. They do it in winter too, but then this summer camp was started so that they could understand how young people, at the time Google was a really company that was funded by young people, started by young people,
grad students, right?
Yeah,
Google and Yahoo.
Yeah, and then now if you look at Google, it's like a monster. And when you look at that modality, they've helped so many companies, and wanted to know how that kind of modality helps in Nepal, because Nepal is in a similar situation, right?
Right.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, the link to the essay will be given down in the description. And about a startup culture in Nepal, a lot of youngsters have started from 18, 19. They've actually started doing something called startup. Let's start up something. Mm-hmm. They right after high school or even during high school, they have some idea and let's work on it.
That's the driving factor, let's say. And that was a similar situation like 14 years ago. Still, there are people like that here, but then there's a lot of support system. There's so many VCs out there, or like these seed funding or incubated programs and accelerators. They're starting in Nepal. So we want to see and compare this article when he wrote it, what kind of mind state he was in, and then we want to compare this to
the current situation
in
Nepal.
Because if you learn from like mistakes or lessons from the past of wise masters, you get to excel a lot and you don't make the same mistakes. Mm-hmm. Which is the first lesson of this essay, which is titled "The Arctics Phase." So if you're at this stage, we've given the link below. You can follow us through what we're talking about. Just pause this video and just go read it, and you might not need to come back and like listen to our video, but we'd like you to. But then this first part of his essay, when he starts talking about how there are young people like Google and Yahoo at the time, and they started their whole business and entrepreneurial thinking when they were really young. And by the time when he was writing this, the scale was sliding even then.
It was coming downwards.
Yeah.
Younger and younger people were getting more into startups.
Yeah, and it wasn't a new thing in US at that time, because Apple and Microsoft's companies were started by youngsters by the standards of those times. Were already giants by 2005. They were post internet bubble, and they were pre-market for the global, what was that, recession? So it was 2007 and 8. This was a special slice of time. And if he were to revise this again at this time, whoever wrote this, Paul Graham, we'd get a different perspective. But then now it's a little bit different. So he talks about having 227 applications for the first Y Combinator program. Now the number of applications is
probably
thousands, in the thousands. So now he saw this trend on his third paragraph of this essay. He talks about there's a third trend. So there's promising people with promising ideas. There's unpromising people with unpromising ideas, and then there's the third one with promising people with unpromising ideas.
Yes.
So he talks about that a lot, and that's why the essay is titled "Why Smart People Have Bad Ideas." And he talks about his company, the Arctics. So this company was this kind of company that would help digitize or put about those art galleries. So he would help companies that sell art on person-to-person basis, help them digitize that, and they can buy it online. But then he talks about why that failed. The first reason that he talks about why it failed was these art companies, they are very tech phobic. So these art galleries, people who work there, they're already kind of people that are really passionate, and they want exclusivity of all, and
they don't want to involve tech and art together.
Yeah, together.
Kind of.
More than that, so if you go to an art gallery and see the painting in person, the amount of confidence you have and the amount of exclusivity you have of just seeing the art in front of you is way more than just seeing art like online on the screen. So they would rather load and unload the photo and like the art every day than put it up online so that anybody, any Tom, Dick and Harry who doesn't have the actual intention to buy it can see it. But then it's 2019. We can probably think of 6-7 different levels of income just through selling art online. But this was 2005. E-commerce wasn't as huge and as global as it is now. What do you think about that perspective?
I guess handicrafts and artworks there are a lot of e-commerce sites right now who are just surviving selling artworks, right? And then what do you think about it?
I mean, now let's say if you had a subscription based service and you design like cartoons, you can have a platform where I know there's several of those platforms where you can just design cartoons and people can buy into it, like just paying subscriptions. Patreon comes to mind. We have a Patreon too if you want to support.
Even memes are artworks, right?
Yeah, memes are artworks, and like
it's a huge internet thing.
Yeah, so Reddit is not just about memes, but then I'm going to mention 9gag, iFunny, and those companies like that. They make a lot of money just through ads and stuff. But he talks about how he went like head on with his first idea, and like the people were skeptical about the Arctics thing, and he calls this the Arctics phase. And the other thing about this is he pushed his co-founder Robert at that time to move into it. He didn't buy it, his co-founder, but then it seemed promising, and even when they decided to do it for free, people wouldn't buy that service. So that was a lesson that we can all learn from, even us, like with this whole podcast and like thing. Right now we're not making money, but then we have like a plan how to make money. But are people willing to take our advice?
Yeah, that's more important when you're starting a startup
or doing a business, any business.
In any business, you must think how to make money.
Yeah, revenue.
If you're passionate about something, there has to be some source of money.
Yeah,
involved.
exactly. And then the other thing about
it's eventually gonna fail.
yeah, and then he mentions how Paul Allen and Bill Gates started another company right before Microsoft. It was called Trafford Data. And nobody remembers Trafford Data except for this dude, because he researched this essay really well. And then now he talks also about like dragging his co-founder into the business. Now it seems like the whole idea is why I want to do this today, and like why this essay is so much important for us individually, is because we need to understand we need to make money too. When you have any business, you want to make money, and the first thing you do is like start making like revenue from day one. That'd be the best business. And he also talks about that.
But then we cannot expect revenue from day one. But we should expect some revenue source though, in the long run.
Let's say even if you don't make money on your first day, you should have like a clear picture. Like I was watching this other YouTube thing, and then this is a really important thing. This guy named Chris Van Vliet said while he was interviewing Dave Bautista, he's like, vague goals gives you vague results. So you need to have like actual like bona fide goals for the end of the year or anything, and then that's what gets you goals. If you have vague goals, you're gonna go into vague directions, and then you're not gonna proceed well. Let's say you have a startup and then you don't have any amount of planning on how much money you want to make on your first year, or let's say first 5 years. You're not gonna make that money. You're not gonna make any money, as far as I understand from this essay.
Yeah, you have to set a vague goal, just like Amazon has a vague goal.
No, I was saying something. Okay. You said a vague vision, so it's not a vague vision. Okay. But a goal is different, right?
Goal is different.
Remember that thing. So you have a goal. Let's say you want to win a match by 3-1. That's a goal, right? That's like you work towards it, you might get that result. But you might win 2-1, but you might not get 3-1, but you actually won. But then you say your vision should be, I'm gonna win the World Cup or tournament in like this many years. That's a goal, but then if you put a number to it, you're gonna say,
it's not vague.
It's not vague. There's this other interview I was watching, or podcast I was watching. It was from Joe Rogan's podcast, and this guy named Naval Ravikant, who also curates Angel List. You might want to check out. The links are in the description. He was talking about how in his first company, before he started, right before 6 months before he wanted to leave, he told everyone he was going to leave in 6 months. So every time somebody would meet up with him, he would be like, why are you not leaving this? Why are you not doing that? So that was kind of the way I understood and how correlated his speech to this essay. Now we're gonna move on to the second part of the essay, or like the second stage, the still life effect. So he starts with why does that happen, and he also talks about how his idea was so lame, and then we see this trend a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in our country. If you're watching from a developing country or a developed country, they're too in love with their ideas, and they don't think about revenue, or they don't think about doing due diligence in terms of research, or even when thinking in terms of an empathetic situation. You should stand yourself in the shoes of a customer. I mean, you might think art, and like he mentions this like in his first paragraph of this part, where art and tech mix together and they go well, but then when you move on from that point, you got to understand not all people think like you in the same industry, right? What's your take on that?
Different people have different perspective, they have different ideas, and you cannot compare two people with the same thing, right?
Now he also mentions, like a couple of paragraphs later, I was trying to find that, the idea of plunging. He says plunging head on is not bad, but then plunging head on with your first idea without like sitting a few days and thinking, that's what he did, and that's how he convinced his co-founder. And it was something that was wrong in his head. So this kind of relates back to the first part of his essay where we talked about earlier. There's like promising people with unpromising ideas. So he did eventually succeed in a company called ViaWeb. Of course, he succeeded because he was one of the first.
Maybe this was a promising idea and the Arctics part was not.
Yeah, exactly.
Promising.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened.
That's what happened.
And then there's other parts about like how he was going to name the thing WebGen, or from ViaWeb, he was gonna name it WebVia or something like that. But then if you really look at this essay, it's like it's not only a slice of time, but it's timeless in itself too. Most of the things that he talks about is so much related
it's
to
still contextual right now. It's an old essay, 14-year-old essay,
but it's still contextual. In the same area, he talks about how even in his new company, from which he moved on from like the Arctics thing, is ViaWeb, and he just did that through a random name generator. So what he did was he took a 3-letter word and another 3-letter word, and he mismatched, and he got something called WebVia, and then from there he went, oh, why don't I switch it in ViaWeb? For 3 days he didn't think that was a good idea, but after that he really fell into love with that, and then he talks about that a little bit.
Yeah,
you might want to check it out.
So good. ViaWeb sounds very good.
And it's a successful company. Somebody bought it, I think. It talks about Yahoo buying it, I don't know. Somebody. Okay. So from there on, there's one of this title called Muck, M-U-C-K. So this other thing about this is where like something that can really help Nepali entrepreneurs and startups is he talks about why he jumped into it, because he thought joining art galleries with the internet was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't do something that's just because it's cool. He reminisces his father's saying about whenever there's muck, there's grass. Whenever grass means money. So if you have to do the dirty work, you're gonna have to, go through so many other things. So sometimes you might not have to do something that is really ravishing, or that is something glamorous. You can do something that is really mundane and you can still make monies. You can't serve two masters. You can't want to be really cool and have a lot of money, and at the same time you can't want to be like a really just a cool startup and like making money. Those for some
might go hand in hand,
but most of the companies don't want to. Who wants to go and like start a business where people have to just write things every day? They just have to transcribe. But if then you wanted to make like a open CV algorithm or something like that, and you sell it online, something like that. I don't know a lot about programming, but if you did that, it seems so cool. But then would people be able to adopt that in Nepal? That's the whole point. I was struggling with this, but then I was thinking Nepal in terms of Kathmandu only, but then the capital city and outside of Nepal are two different countries.
Yeah.
And then, you have to adapt to what you were.
Way of living, mindset, it's completely different.
Yeah. And then, who wants to do like really mundane work? Would you rather go and just start working in an assembly line? You'd get paid really well, but then you don't want to go work in an assembly line, right? But then he also talks about the most important thing is making money doesn't happen by accident. You have to work towards it. If you know how to make money by accident, you have the superpower, please let me know. But then you have to work towards it. That's what he does. From there on, he goes to Hyenas. So why he mentions hyenas, and then it goes to another essay. It has a link to an essay which we're gonna talk about. Is hyenas are the most lowest forms of predators in the fighting in the jungle, let's say, right? Whenever you have a jungle and like hyenas are there, they're just feeding on carcasses, and they're really low.
They're just wild.
Yeah, and then if you've seen the Lion King, the animated movie, you know how hyenas are. Let's just put it that way. And versus a lion, which goes out and hunts. Well, the lionesses hunt, but the image of a lion, contextually or conceptually, is of a predator, like the apex predator. And there's the difference. He talks about how he was scared of jumping into e-commerce because he was scared of people getting 20-30 million dollars on his competitors started getting 20-30 millions from VCs, and he was really scared of people of companies that were backed up by VCs, right?
Starting something on his own, and someone with the competitor who has millions of dollars of backup, so it is pretty scary.
Yeah, it is pretty scary, but then it doesn't seem scary after it didn't seem scary to him after he actually jumped in and then started working really hard towards it. And then it also puts a link to another essay which is called the Unified Theory of VC Suckage. This Unified Theory of VC Suckage was really illuminating for me, because this is where he points out why so many VCs are jerks. Okay, so now this is a lesson for our VCs too. Most of the VCs in the Western countries, they have like 100 million or a high amount of money in their funds, because they only get up to maximum 2% from their earnings or revenue of investments. So if you're getting 2% of $100,000, how much is that? $2,000?
$2,000.
If you're getting 2% of $100 million, how much is that?
It's $2 million,
right? So you gotta invest a lot. So you gotta be paranoid. You gotta be worried it's not your money, it's somebody else's money. You don't want a negative portfolio. You only want a positive portfolio. That's when like these VCs seem so bad or so worse, and they
seem like sucking something.
The energy out of it. And he wrote this a month before he wrote like the earlier essay, and it kind of seems why he did that, because in the start of his essay he mentions why he doesn't want he was offered a job as a VC like head or technical some person with the prowess, but then he didn't want to participate in that because he was opposed to it. But then he talks about there are some good VCs too, but those best ones, the ones with the no negative portfolios or less amount of negative portfolios, have this one thing, is that they only care about the product and they only want to make the business bigger and better.
He mentions even VCs hate VCs and they call themselves assholes
or something like that. And he also talks about how, going back to the hyenas thing, he also talks about figuring out if you have a service or a product. So if you have a product, when you have an IPO, products are something tangible. You buy a product, it's with you, the money you get back from it is yours. But then if you have a service, people might choose to opt out of that service. So during the internet bubble of 2000, 2001, that's right after when he wrote this essay, right before he wrote this essay, that's when people started showing that their services were in terms like a product. I can't really recall what company he was talking about, but then he also said it was a bad decision not to go against a company or companies that were backed by VCs just because he was scared. So basically, if you're out there, just don't become scared if some VCs are doing.
Yeah, he mentions Arctics was like hyenas and others were like lions, and the lions turned out to not have teeth.
at all. And he also mentioned this one more thing. I don't know, it might be true or not in today's day and age, but 14 years ago, as much as he had noticed, this is one person's perspective, by the way, these VCs were mostly spending a lot of money to write code or get an app made or something like that at that time. That was a issue back then. I don't know if that's an issue now, because most of the VCs have learned a lot from like other people's mistakes. Even VCs in Nepal know a lot about giving creative control to people. But then if you're going against a VC in Nepal, I really think you should do a lot of research when it comes to doing your startup. And then he moves on to a part called a familiar problem. I mean, this is also my favorite part. He says why his first company was a bad idea, because it was some of all his error. They were being very, very uncareful about what kind of business they wanted to do. They did the first thing that came into their mind, and they chose a really small niche market that they couldn't make money on just because they were scared. So the three things you don't need to have, according to him, if you're a really smart person, and these are the things a smart person does knowingly. First, you're scared of competition. Second, you choose to go with the first idea. And third, you do not understand the idea of making money, how to make money and when to make money.
Three mistakes.
The thing that he talks about on his first, let's say the first 227 applications in his first Y Combinator bootcamp, is these companies have not just thought about how this thing is going to make money.
What the customer wants, how they are going to lure customer in. They had no idea about it.
So and then he targeted this bootcamp at that time to hackers, but now it has expanded to a lot of people. But then he also said if people could get the learnings from what he learned from his Arctic phase, they could skip it altogether and they could be savvy businessmen and then invest their time and money in things that matter. Let's say he also talks about how these hackers or people who are really smart don't choose to do things that are problem solutions. They choose to do things that seem cool, and these things will not help you in your business on the long run, because ultimately any goal of any business is making money. That's what he says, and I kind of really relate to that aspect, because when you don't have money, you don't need to do a lot of things altogether. You just have to do that one thing, is to make money. You get things that you don't have. How do you relate that to our business model? Like, how do we make money? Because at this point, we see avenues of making money. We know how to make money, but then we're working towards it. But on the longer run, let's say we want to scale up the amount of revenue we have. How do we proceed? Having read what Paul Graham has written here. My strategy is, as far as I understand, is amount of knowledge we bring to the table, and the amount of knowledge we can impart to the people that we can connect with, because that's the most lacking things. So
we must put something new in the plate, right? There's something lacking in the ecosystem here in Nepal.
Yeah, we might so this whole thing, like this whole ecosystem is not that big. But then we are trying to traverse the whole shark-infested water, let's say, and then we're trying to nail that some SOB right there, and we can sort of pinpoint what things are wrong in several aspects, and we're not close at all of hitting like the target right there, but it takes us a little bit of time. But then we're figuring out what things go wrong and how people get to that part where they make those mistakes, because
we're just going around and we're not
trying to we're trying to circumnavigate the whole waters, let's say, first now.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that's going to take a little bit of time, and I don't see a lot of other people doing that because, and that's our strategy. Our thing about it is to understand the market itself. People don't put in the hours to do this. This is the hardest thing to do. Like he says, whenever there's muck, there's grass. And when you cut grass, you get paid. And he also talks about something really interesting in this part where he's talking about a familiar problem being that people don't want to solve problems in the shoes of a customer. They can't think. These hackers, these engineers, these MIT grads don't put themselves in the shoes of the people that are trying to buy their product. It's going to be really hard. Yes, I mean, Google and all these companies, they were started by engineers and they didn't have all these managers, but then those people clearly understood what their customers wanted. That's how he transitions to his next part.
They could empathize the customers, right?
Yeah, copper and tin. Now the thing about it, in his hyperlink, it's paulgraham.com/bronze.html. So what do you get when you mix copper and tin? Bronze. And it's stronger, better than copper and tin both. And how he understands that is, at least if you have a hacker or like a computer engineer or a person in hard sciences who understands what his how his product is going to make money, how his business is going to make money, and how his business is going to run, and how his customer understands, that is the most strongest person out there in the startup industry. I'll give you an example. Elon Musk. Like Elon Musk was there at that time at PayPal, but he wasn't as big celebrity or big name as he is now. Back then he was still he was part of the PayPal like trio, but then now when you really think about it, Elon Musk knows how to do that. He's marketing really well when it comes to Twitter, Reddit, and all his online presence. But he has that.
He's branding himself very well right now.
And then that's something that really sets himself, like him and himself, apart from all these like innovators out there, because he plays to his strengths a lot, and then he also highlights his weaknesses as his strength. And I really like that fact. There's something he quotes about, like, this dude says 80% of MIT's spin-offs succeeded because they had management people, and then he debunks this theory by saying Larry Page and Sergey Brin destroyed, or they were able to withstand Alta Vista because Alta Vista was run by managers only, but then these two people knew how to run their business, and they were also hackers. Right? Yeah, they were engineers. They were grad school students. Now, one more thing he talks about is that you might have a manager from Wharton or manager from Harvard MBA school, and they might come in and try to help you in your business, but if they don't have domain knowledge, they might not be able to help you a lot.
They have to know what you're doing, what you're providing to the customer. They need to have some domain knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of domain knowledge actually. And why startups succeed is, if you want to do a startup and you want to be involved in it, obviously you're really smart. And when you do, when a smart person is hired in, let's say, Google, that person will do research, nothing but research. They won't like clean the floor or manage like APIs or do small things, mundane things that that is beneath them, let's say. There are many people who choose salary-based options because doing work for themselves and doing small odd jobs is beneath them. That idea is not bad, but then he also says in this essay, if those people were really smart into research, if they started doing mundane things, they would escalate the level of quality those mundane tasks have and make the company better. So when you're building things from like all these big shot companies like Google and everything, why are they so great? Is because they were the best at mundane things. And I've heard this story about this great artist who spends a lot of time in small details, because small details eventually create perfection. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, small details. We have to pay attention to the small details to bring something very good, to bring out something good. We have to focus on research of very specific small things in order to collaborate all of them into a big product, or something like that.
So he also mentions about Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influences People, and he also says read the un-PC version from the 40s and the 50s, not the dumbed down version, because you get to learn a lot, because it might be presented in a more palatable manner right now, but then if you read something from 80 years ago, it might be much more useful to you to understand how actually business happens, because business world is not so PC as far as we've seen, right? And then he also talks about the work of a hacker or startup entrepreneur to things beneath them is also compared to Einstein designing refrigerators. So something that is beneath Einstein's level of understanding. But then he also says that's a superpower these entrepreneurs can have. And if you add that to already having people doing something really great, people, hackers, let's say, or people with great skill or smart people, you can have a really good company. And that's adding smartness with a little business savviness, and then making that bronze from tin and copper, let's say. And he ends this essay with an anecdote where he says he was going to put on the back of t-shirts of startup, like the startup camp for Y Combinator, as if you can read this, I should be working. But then he has changed to something like make something people want. And that's the theme of this essay. Like
and that's the theme of the whole business,
or any business,
or any startup. Make something people want.
And then there's this little anecdote that I forgot to put. He said, go tell somebody to do something, and then if they find a lot of flaws in that whole process, design a solution that can mitigate the flaw. And trust me, a lot of people are going to pay for that. And there are so many businesses that you think, oh, why didn't I think of that? Somebody already thought of that because they went and watched the process. So if you really want to start a business or a startup, go watch something people are having a problem with and try to design a solution for that, right? I mean,
exactly.
Let's say
find a problem, design a solution, there's your business.
Yeah, but then you have to go ask the people if they would buy that, right?
Yeah.
So
that's finding the problem. If people have problem in it and you design a solution, there's your business.
Yeah, I mean, let us know if we butchered our understanding, your understanding of this whole essay. That's how we understood it. I mean, we're not like deep thinkers. We're just doing things on our own way.
We're not trying to demotivate any of your ideas.
Yeah, but then have a read.
Might work. Despite what we're saying, it might work. We're not trying to demotivate.
This is from 14 years ago. Things might have changed for you. Nepal's a different animal, or any developing country you might be watching this from is a different animal. Yeah, we'll be doing these kind of videos a lot from now on, so that we can understand a little bit more, and then you can understand from us. So hope to see you next time. There will be clips for this video in a playlist titled Clips, so you can watch like clips of it all, and then we'll put the exact location of what we were talking about of the essay right there. So hope to see you soon.
Thank you.